Namaste. Greetings and warm regards to all of you seeing this and hearing these words. Today is Monday, December 12th, 2016. And in these videos, which is approximately twice a month, we come together and we talk about time. We talk about how time is a physical influence which affects us. And so it's a considerably non-theoretical thing, time, despite us having proven on some level or another that time is an illusion. Time is a reference to physical happenings in our world and our solar system. And so, one Earth rotation around the Sun is a year, which is made up of approximately 12 lunar rotations around the Earth and 365 Earth rotations. And so we're talking about physical occurrences. And in these videos we talk about how time does affect us physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, as all of these things are tied together in the singular occurrence that we call life on this planet. And so the physical happenings and occurrences going on at this time is rather dense. There's a lot happening, and it's heavy. It's intense. The times and the circumstances on this planet are really forcing us and calling our attention to some very important transitions and circumstances here on this planet. And so I've really been sitting in and stewing in what's been going on at this time, really trying to think about what we're going to talk about, which is a lot. There's a lot happening on this planet at this time, and it's important that we really come together and we meet in this singular point that is our global situation. And so I'm going to begin sort of by rewinding the clock back to the beginning of December, when we had the planet Mercury enter Capricorn, and we also had Chiron turn direct. And Chiron, the wounded healer, centaur planet, has been a very active influence so far in this month of December, and will remain an active influence through the remainder of this month, as we do have a full moon in Gemini tomorrow, which will also be square to Chiron. And we have Saturn square to Chiron going on this month, and Saturn square to Chiron is one of the major influences going on throughout 2017 as well. And so Chiron, being the wounded healer planet and archetype, is what takes us into our deepest wounds in many respects. Redundant wounding experiences, things that are seen as hindrances, not really fun and games, but it's extremely important in our lives and together as a collective and as a community that we do confront the uncomfortable, the unsettling, the difficult areas in our life, which Saturn square to Chiron. Saturn finally finished a square to Neptune that's been going on the last year, and now will be square to Chiron this next year. The Saturn square Chiron influence forces us into these wounding areas, forces us into these uncomfortable zones. Outside of our comfort zone is where we get pushed in order to acknowledge and change and mature the underlying dynamics which are causing these reoccurring, painful, or wounding experiences that can create a sense of inadequacy, insecurity, isolation, being misunderstood, being abandoned. And so if you have been feeling or experiencing any of these dynamics, abandonment, insecurity, inadequacy, it is calling our attention into these areas. That way we can transform. As that butterfly that just landed on the camera is a beautiful reminder of. And so using that butterfly as an analogy, when the butterfly is in the cocoon state and then is trying to push out of the cocoon state, it is an uncomfortable time. It is not fun. There is a sense of claustrophobia. There is a sense of not being able to leave the past of that hard, brittle, and limiting structure behind, and yet it must be passed through. And so we are going through this process as a collective in a very, very big, deep, meaningful, significant way. And in a way that is a long-term process. We are leaving the cocoon as a collective, not just this year or next year, but the next several years. And what is being brought to our attention at this time is really bringing these circumstances and dynamics to our attention so we can start this transforming, processing, and ultimately healing process. And so, when Mercury entered Capricorn at the beginning of December, this is bringing our minds to these physical, important, serious areas in our life. And we also just had the Sun conjoin Saturn a couple days ago, and really that's a month-long influence as well, making us be serious about life. This is a period of maturity. What is your truth? Is Saturn in Sagittarius? How is it working for you? What is our philosophy on life? It's time to mature our direction, what we are moving towards, and how we are working together in order to really improve and heal these situations. But it does require hard work. It does require getting down with the nitty-gritty business. On December 7th, Venus entered the sign of Aquarius, joining Mars in Aquarius, and Mars is going to remain in Aquarius for another week until December 19th when Mars enters Pisces. With both Mars and Venus being in Aquarius, this next week is thoroughly revolutionary. There's a lot of spontaneous eruption that is coming as a result of suppression. Dealing with long outstanding patterns of these wounds, inadequacies, insecurities, all of this stuff is being brought to our attention, much like our nose is being shoved in our own shit, for lack of a more comfortable phrase. And that can create a sense of discomfort and also a sense of needing to get the hell out of here, change these dynamics, get rid of the inadequacy, the abandonment issues, the insecurities, etc. We are sick of it. These are long outstanding patterns. These oppressive regimes and the stories and the dynamics, which we will get to in just a minute, are old, and we are tired of it. Venus is the divine feminine. Jupiter is in the sign of Libra throughout most of this next year, being ruled by Venus. Wherever you can see Venus transiting these next several months is where our attention is going to be called. There is illumination being brought to these areas. That way expansion and revolution can happen, as Jupiter is going to be opposite Uranus for the next part of these next several months as well, and then again in spring of 2017. These are thoroughly revolutionary, exciting transits that are evoking this type of pioneering restlessness that we have to break out of the old limiting patterns and create new ones, invent. And it also creates this reactivity that can be spontaneous and can just simply want to overthrow the old. And for this next week, particularly with Mars also in Aquarius, we need to harness this revolutionary energy in a way which is actually going to be beneficial for others. And the Sun has been in Sagittarius for a couple weeks and will remain in Sagittarius for about another week until our winter solstice on December 21st. This calls our attention to our particular philosophy, our truth. We'll talk about this full moon in Gemini happening tomorrow. Really evokes a sense of political divisionism. Truth and philosophy, opinion and interests versus other truth, philosophy, political standpoints, etc. Sagittarius is our perspective. And so we need to harness this revolutionary energy in a way which is actually going to be beneficial to other people, rather than just simply disagreeing and conflicting and divisionism, because is divisionism helping us as a collective and a world move forward and actually heal each other? Absolutely not. It's counterproductive. It's moving into the past. It's making mounds, molehills into mountains, etc. There can be a lot of this going on. because we all have our personal truths that are important to us. They give us a sense of purpose, and when other people are denying our personal truth, saying that's not true, your point or your opinion doesn't matter, that hurts us. And so we need to be very, very careful these days, particularly with this full moon in Gemini, which creates divisionism, to make sure that we are not encouraging divisionism. Is political banter, is all of this revolutionary energy actually going into high octave Aquarius, which is humanitarianism? Oftentimes this political banter and this back and forth and this blaming and scapegoating one another is the opposite of humanitarianism, because you are discrediting another person's perspective instead of acknowledging that each human being is a unique individual that is going to have an individual perspective based off of our own unique experiences and passageways and journeys throughout life. Respect the other, even if you do not agree with them. And so we had Venus and Mars in Aquarius this next week. On Monday, December 19th, a week from today, Mercury turns retrograde, conjoined Pluto at 15 degrees of Capricorn, and on the same day, Mars enters Pisces. The next significant shifting of energies is going to be next week on the 19th. And when Mars pushes from Aquarius into Pisces, it creates a sense of lack of certainty in terms of how we are using and channeling our own physical energy, our drive, and our direction. So keep that in mind, that things can change going into the future, where all of a sudden all of this certainty and my purpose and my goals and this is what is true and this is what the world needs can change. And this change is oftentimes called and is evolution, which means that our own orientation to our truth and our own orientation to how we are using and directing our physical willpower and energy can change. Now, it's really tough not to talk about the political situation going on in the world in these astrology videos right now, because it is such a clear and concise reflection of what we are collectively going through. It's not just a reflection, it's hand in hand. This is called synchronicity, was the term coined by Carl Jung, which is the understanding that as above, so below. As the gods and the planets are going through their dance, it is not causing the dance here on Earth, it is synchronistic. It is a reflection. It is a divine connection, as above, so below. And so similarly, as within, so without, these political situations are reflecting what we are individually evolving through and changing, and collectively evolving through and changing. And so I believe around December 19th, when Mercury turns retrograde and Mars enters Pisces, is when the Electoral College in the United States is meeting and deciding, and actually are the ones who are voting for the next president of the United States, because of course we all know at this point that it's not a popular vote that determines the president. It's not even the actual population of the United States that determines the president. It is the Electoral College, which is supposed to represent the people and perhaps the popular vote. And there is a possibility with these physical time references that we call astrology, saying that there can be some disruptions with the Electoral College that can create a sense of confusion, right? It's like when we had election day a month or two ago, whenever it was. Time, where has it been these last couple of months? It's been confusing with all of this Neptune Piscean influence. On election day, that night, the moon moved into Pisces and Mars entered Aquarius. Now the Electoral College meets, Mars is moving into Pisces. Mercury's turning retrograde, conjoined Pluto. What is this Mercury retrograde that's going to be taking us through the rest of December? Up until January 8th is when Mercury will station direct at 28 degrees of Sagittarius. Well, this Mercury retrograde on December 19th is beginning conjoined Pluto in the middle of Capricorn. This is very symbolic. This is us as a collective seriously looking at the situation regarding our structures, our governments, our regimes, the traditions and the expectations and obligations coming from authorities, and is it working or is it not? It is a very penetrative seeing beneath the surface, how are these structures and how are these regimes working, or how are they not? And obviously they are not. There isn't a single politician running that is saying everything is hunky-dory. It's all about revolution and change, because that is where we are in physical time. This is happening. You know, it's people think that these archetypes and these stories are just man-made creations, but they're not. Are the seasons man-made creations? No, they are physical references, and these physical things do affect us. Now, this Mercury retrograde is coming at a very appropriate time. And that is because when Mercury retrograde is happening, and again, Mercury is retrograde the 19th through January 8th, this is a time of processing. And there has been so much going on these last several months, these last several weeks alone. We need this time to do all of this processing. When Mercury is retrograde, it takes us back into the past. Mercury retrograde in Capricorn is looking at history, physically. What is the history of the United States? What is the history of our world regimes? What is the history of male-dominant patriarchy, which has resulted to this situation that is going on, where we are seeing these incredibly poignant symbols depicted, such as the South Dakota pipeline being built through a Native American, one of the last chunks of land the Native Americans get to inhabit. And there was all of this media propaganda that the pipeline's been denied and all this stuff. Be very aware that we can't just trust what the media is saying to us. Use your eyes to see what is happening in the world. Stop sharing all of this stuff on Facebook and all of this propaganda coming from news resources. One huge lesson that we ought to be learning at this time is how that dynamic has severely messed us up from actually comprehending the truth. Because all of these media companies are companies, they're corporations that are bought and sold. And so that pipeline is still being built, and we need to keep the scrutiny and the eye on that, because this has to do with the survivalism of ourself as a planet, and the reason why we are on the brink of extinction, if you want to take a very big picture point of view, which we should. It's because of male-dominant patriarchy, which has led us away from the earth. It's led us away from sensitivity and appreciation of one another, so we don't respect each other's differences and cultures, because it's all about the strongest will survive. Is a distortion that results from male-dominant distortion. It's not even real masculinity, but masculine distortion that we know as the patriarchy. By the way, we're going to talk about how there is a revolutionary feminist movement that's going to be going on these next several months as well. But before we get to that, let's talk about this full moon in Gemini happening tomorrow. It's happening tomorrow evening, December 13th, 22 degrees Gemini. And this is a very strong full moon. It's opposite to Saturn, square to Chiron, sextile to Uranus, in a grand trine between Mars in Aquarius and Jupiter in Libra. This is a very powerful full moon. It's going to be evoking all sorts of feelings, all sorts of opinions, and again, this Gemini-Sagittarius polarity is where we get much of the butting of heads, philosophy versus opinion, etc. Gemini is divisionism, right? It's the two columns that never come together. This can be a very problematic sign in many respects, but with any zodiac sign, there is no such thing as good and bad. There are higher octaves that are essentially respective of that nature, whereas Gemini is the mind. We need duality in order to think, in order to speak, in order to communicate. You must divide and label the things that are around us, which are individuated. They are separate from one another, even though we're all ultimately connected, like tree branches connected to the trunk. Well, we can name and point out, oh yes, that branch is different than that branch, and this branch has leaves and that branch doesn't, etc. That's Gemini. We need Gemini in order to think, in order to communicate. It's not an inherently bad sign. However, with all of this divisionism and different opinions and different perspectives, at this particular point in time, it is revealing to us how divided we are as a species, as a culture, as a world, and how that is preventing us from working together in a harmonious way. And Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, is all about unification. It's all about the underlying truth, which is universal, which speaks for itself. The sun goes around the earth once a year, and even if you say the year is a hypothetical thing, whatever, this movement is happening. This movement between the earth is happening. You can observe, you can see, the truth is self-apparent in Sagittarius. Sagittarius rules intuition. It's wisdom that comes from you from just knowing and seeing. You don't have to read a book. You don't have to go to class. You don't need a teacher to tell you what the truth is via Sagittarius. And this is all high octave Sagittarius. Is natural law, universal principles that speak for themselves. What is low octave Sagittarius? It is when we take our personal truth and our personal perspective, which is also Sagittarius. It is your philosophy, your ontology, which you use to comprehend your reality. And ontologies change and evolve throughout time. The Greeks and Romans saw the gods as being real. That was nature. They were simultaneous. Now many of us don't see the world in that way. That is called ontology. Religion is an ontology. Science is an ontology. It's the way that you are breaking apart and discerning your reality is the Gemini-Sagittarius polarity. When we think that our perspective, which is undeniably for any human being going to be limited because you're not God, you don't see from every person's vision simultaneously here on this planet, you see it from your own alone. When we think that that limited perspective, our human perspective, is the be-all, end-all truth, that is low octave Sagittarius. That is Crusadum. Just like how the Crusades actually happened in our collective history, and the Pope said to the conquistadors, "You are the chosen sons of God. Your role, your duty, your divine duty handed down from God to me, to you, is to go to other countries and convert them all to Christianity because Christianity is the be-all, end-all truth." And so those conquistadors went and slaughtered and tortured people. What they thought they were doing was divine. Can be low octave Sagittarius. We need to watch out for Crusadum and instead get to the underlying unifying principles. And so it's difficult not to point out Donald Trump, who was born on a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, which means that his sun and moon are aligned with the moon's nodes. His sun is in Gemini, conjoined Uranus on the moon's north node. Gemini can be the salesperson. Gemini can be word jugglery. Look what I can say. Look what I can do. Does it have any of the underlying substance? And by the way, before I get all these people unfollowing me and all this stuff because I'm speaking about politics, I am not voicing my political opinion. I am not pro this political candidate, anti this political candidate, because this is a reference to physical time. It doesn't matter who's in office. This stuff is going to be revealed and worked through these next several years. Let's say hypothetically the Electoral College puts Hillary Clinton in office. Everything's still going to be falling apart these next several years. I don't care who's in the office. This next several years is about the transmutation of global powers. And it's getting serious, and it's getting intense, and it's not fun and games because we are dealing with oppressive regimes. And whoever is going to be in office, their job as the president is almost to be the collective scapegoat because everything in the world gets blamed on the president. Is that realistic? Not really. But that's what happens. That's the dynamic in this culture that's still an awful lot like a monarchy. Okay, so anyways, not political, but looking at Donald Trump, Gemini opposite to the moon in Sagittarius. Now, it's fascinating how much Donald Trump has been bringing up feminist male versus woman stuff in what he's talking about. There's like real world things that are going on in terms of, national countries versus countries, world powers in tension with one another. There's an awful lot of time being spent talking about these somewhat trivial and mundane things. And he's spending a lot of time talking about male versus women stuff. I just listened to him talking about the fact that he was made Time's Person of the Year, and he brought up the point that it used to be called Man of the Year. And he's talking to an audience, and he said, how many of you would like it to be Man of the Year versus Person of the Year? And the crowd roars. And he says, how many of you would like it to be Person of the Year? And there's crickets. That's astonishing. This is bringing to our attention, irrelevant of the person, and we'll get to this in a second. There are no good guys or bad guys out there. That type of divisionistic mentality is what I have been speaking out against throughout this entire last year, and will continue to remain to do so, because I, as a person, would like to provide and talk about solutions to the situations that we find at hand. You fighting and warring and unfriending, and I can't look at white people anymore, I can't look at black people anymore, I can't look at Muslims anymore, I'm afraid of this, it's all coming out of fear, all of this divisionism. It's all coming out of lack of trust of one another as human beings, which is a result of distortion. If we understood who we are in our nature, we wouldn't be afraid of one another. We're only afraid of one another because the Crusades did happen, and people who said, this is my truth, went out there and slaughtered a bunch of people. And by the way, those people that were slaughtering and torturing everybody thought that they were killing off the enemy. If you are pointing fingers at any quote-unquote enemies, you are a part of the problem. Know it, hear it, see it, and change it. I'm not trying to embarrass or humiliate anybody, but this is really important stuff. Rob Bresky is a wonderful astrology. He has such a poignant illustration. Historical fact. In the medieval ages, the Roman Catholic Church deemed cats ambassadors of the devil, because if you learn anything about the Dark Ages, that's the age that we're still trying to clean up and move out of. Study the Dark Ages. Nobody wants to because it's uncomfortable, it's disgusting, it's disturbing. That's what we're still trying to heal out of the collective. Cats were made ambassadors of the devil because that's how afraid us as human beings were afraid of everything. And we're still that way. And this is xenophobia and all this stuff. We need to purge this out of the system, which requires us understanding universal truth that there are no bad guys out there. There are only wounded children that lash out on one another because they don't know how to take care of themselves. When cats were made ambassadors of the devil, thousands and thousands of cats were exterminated, which resulted in the rat population surging and growing beyond comprehension, which resulted in hundreds and millions of people dying from the Black Plague. This is what happens when you blame another as being evil, the devil, or darkness, is you become a vessel for evil, the devil, and darkness. The truth is there is no devil. There is no exterior force that is trying to manipulate and pervert you. We as human beings only have the free will and the choices, which allows us via our own willpower to choose such circumstances to occur on this planet. Does anyone want to own up and take responsibility for that fact? I hope so. I really hope so. Because it is necessary. It is necessary for us to move beyond the fact that we are accountable and responsible for our own global situation if we wish to change and heal it. Because you can't keep blaming other people for what's wrong with the world while you are providing no solutions yourself. And by the way, this fire and this tension and this dynamic that's evoked through me, this is what we're feeling and seeing as a collective. And it does get frictionous, and it does cause heads to butt, and I will be losing followers because of this, and that's okay. You know, it's not about popularity in terms of this stuff at all. But can we come together and meet each other and discuss and resolve the underlying dynamics and problems so that way we can heal these things going on into the future? Because going back to the feminism dynamic, there is a feminist revolution that is in time going to be provoked whether Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton are the president of the United States. And we can stop talking about them as examples, but it's just very poignant because everybody in the world's looking to them and they are kind of directing the collective consciousness. And this is what we are collectively going through at this time. 2017 is going to be a huge revival of feminism happening in the world. And what feminism is something that we are all learning and discovering together. Because oftentimes what we see being portrayed as feminism is actually masculinity in disguise. And what I mean by that is women want to be powerful, women want to be in charge, women want to be authorities and bosses. And that should be provided to everybody as a given. The age of Aquarius, which is the sign of humanitarianism, is understanding that gender says nothing about who you are as an individual. There are men who are severely more sensitive and soft and compassionate than other women, who may be more severely practical and rational and powerful and strong than other men. That is just acknowledging the nature of what it means to be a human being. But when we're talking about feminism and masculinity on a sort of deeper, more symbolic, energetic level, things are getting a little bit more deep and somewhat complicated, because we're trying to figure out what is masculinity as an energy and as a force versus femininity. And in astrology and in nature and in ancient tradition, it's pretty much agreeing that masculinity is the defensive, protective, strong quality that is supposed to defend and protect the softer, more compassionate, more yielding qualities that is the feminism. And so compassion comes from femininity. Empathy comes from femininity. And because we've lived in a distorted, male-dominant world for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, we don't even really know what femininity looks like in a way that is acknowledged and respected by our culture and world. And what we are seeing brought to our attention, one way or the other, is this similar dynamic. What femininity is exactly what I'm talking about when I say there are not bad guys out there, there are only children. Comes from compassion that does not judge and label and say you are what needs to get fought, you are responsible for the problems of the world, bad guy. It is the emotional feeling into, okay, where is this person coming from? Donald Trump has been vilified by many, many people. He has what can be said malefic narcissistic personality disorder, which is a real serious mental disorder. And by the way, President Obama more than likely has narcissistic personality disorder. This is a real disorder that is a coping mechanism that is formed out of the wounds and painful experiences that one experiences in childhood. Who is talking about this? Who is acknowledging this? Who is having compassion for this? Nobody, because everybody wants to blame and slay and see the enemy strung up or burnt at the stake. And then we relive our karma and our collective history, and we are fighting and we're living in hell again and again and again and again, and we wonder why, because we are not embracing love and compassion for one another. It does not say if an intruder breaks into your house or a demon starts sucking your blood that you let them. That's not what that is saying. You push that demon off, you shut that person out of your house, and you simultaneously understand that that's not the devil incarnate who is trying to attack you. It is someone who is severely hurt. Someone who's breaking into your house is more than likely extremely impoverished and has been enforced into a criminal lifestyle. I lived in the ghetto for several years. I really learned these lessons in a very intense, face-to-face type of way. Speaking of lessons, let's talk about 2016 and what we've learned, because man, it's been a hard year, hasn't it? I don't think there's many people on the globe who are looking back to 2017 and been just like, what a year. That was so much fun. So much was just served to me on a silver platter. No, it's been a year of work. We've had the North Node in Virgo the whole year. It's been about rectification, seeing what needs to get cleaned up, seeing what needs to get fixed, and doing the practical revisionary work. Saturn has been square to Neptune the entire last year. That transit has finally completed after the entire last year. That has been all about seeing what is not working in my beliefs, what's not working in collective beliefs, what's not working in authority, our culture, etc. And so, let's rewind the clock a year ago to the last full moon in Gemini, which I believe is at the end of November in 2015. That was when the first Saturn-Neptune square was exact. Think about what was going on in November. What lessons were you being introduced to at that time, and what lessons have you learned since that time? And honestly, it's very interesting. I never go back and listen to my videos after they're online. But has been one video that I felt called to go back and listen to, and it was last year's full moon in Gemini video. And there's just something creepily sort of foreshadowing about that video. And so what I was learning at that particular time is that there really isn't any enemies out there. There is only a complicated situation where all of us, as inherently innocent children of God, being spiritual souls, we're trying to move through our own distortions, coming from culture, coming from what our parents taught us, coming from what religions taught us, coming from what authorities and governments taught us, that leads to all of this divisionism and fragmentation that keeps us all warring from one another, believing that there's enemies out there when there aren't, that keeps us from being in harmony here on this planet, which is leading to the destruction of this planet, because we can't get behind a single goal. And so what have you been learning? Seriously, feel free to comment below. What have you learned in this last year? I would love to hear with it. I'd love this to stir up collective discussion. Let's learn from one another as a collective. This isn't meant to be just a one-way thing. I'm constantly learning and feeding back from the information that I'm getting from my audiences and my work with clients, etc. So what have you learned? And a lot of what we've been learning with the North Node in Virgo and all this Chiron stuff happening right now, and by the way, Uranus in Aries is going over the United States of America's Chiron right now. It's really bringing our attention to these cultural collective wounds. What has been neglected? What has been neglected that is calling our attention at this time is going to be what unifies us. And whatever terms you want to use, I'm saying it's the divine feminine, which is connected to our planet Earth. Our planet Earth needs to survive. We do need to acknowledge how we are destroying the Earth using our technology that is already outdated, using our ignorance of one another, of the various life forms on this planet. It is not acceptable that we are driving so many animals and species into extinction. It's not acceptable. We don't need to blame the people that are doing that and say they're the enemies and we need to kill them off. We need to understand, why are you so angry? Why do you need to feel good about dominating something that is lesser than you? Because that will take us more so the collective root issues. We need to be behind singular goals. And throughout these next several years, we will be more than likely forced into these collective wounds. Saturn square to Chiron this next year is going to force us into our own personal as well as our collective wounds. What has been neglected, what has been abandoned, what has been set to the side that can no longer be set to the side because we are killing ourselves, we are killing our spiritual nature, we are killing our own innocence. And when you point the finger and are blaming other people for everything that's wrong with the world, you will learn through understanding that all things are connected and we are all reflections of one another. You will kill your own innocence. And that type of crusadum, and there's one religion that is saved and other people are damned, is killing innocence, etc. I mean, you are literally working for, I shouldn't even say it. It starts to get way too complicated. So, Christmas time 2016. Really powerful Christmas time this year. Saturn is square to Chiron. Jupiter is opposite to Uranus, like exactly on Christmas time. And this is the first opposition where all this stuff is being introduced. This is a shocking time. Whoa! These changes are happening. Whoa! These really deep, really powerful philosophical viewpoints are being brought to my attention. Whoa! There's revolution happening. Whoa! There's things being pointed out that need to get pointed out. Like the fact that in Ohio they just made, abortion and all this stuff is coming to the forefront. This is important. As human beings, how much free will are you entitled to is like an actual thing that we're looking at right now. This is really critical. This affects each and every human being. And so this is a lot of Uranus stuff. Uranus is transiting through Aries. This is about liberation of the individual. Jupiter is transiting through Libra, ruled by Venus, which is how are we going to revolutionize and liberate ourselves as individuals and simultaneously be able to function harmoniously? How are we going to establish peace on this planet? How are we going to work together as a collective in harmony and in balance? Because if we don't, and if we continue this divisionism, this is what gives rise to Nazi-like regimes, is scapegoating and blaming. And the reason why these patterns keep repeating is we have not learned the lessons. We have to actually learn these lessons, understand them, realize them, implement them, integrate them, or else the cycle and the wheel of karma will keep repeating, and that is hell. There's nothing more hellish than this having to relive torture again and again and again, and we don't know why, and it's not because it's punishment, it's because we are supposed to be learning that this is not happening from somebody, some God making this happen to us. It is resulting from our own collective and individual choices, and we need to change where our direction and our choices have been in the past. Unfortunately, Uranus is trine to Saturn simultaneously, and that is going to be going on this next year of 2017. And when Saturn and Uranus are coming together in that type of harmonious aspect, it is a blessing and a gift, because Uranus is the revolutionary, blowing up, tilling over, breaking down the limitations and the constructs of the past that is essentially prison. Uranus is the great awakener. Uranus is the liberator. Uranus is Prometheus stealing fire from heaven and bringing it down to earth, going behind Zeus's back, breaking rules in order to liberate humans is the Uranian influence. We need to break these patterns, these rules, these regimes, absolutely, or else we will live in hell. Period. Saturn is the structure, is the laws, is the rules. When Uranus is in trine to Saturn, we can restructure the rules, the systems, the authorities, the structures, the fundamental whatever, the traditions, how we see each other as cultures, how we see each other as families. We can restructure all of these things in a way that actually allows for us to evolve forward, that allows for us to come into humanitarianism, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all of these things that we say that we supposedly represent in this United States. And the whole world looks at United States because it's this global superpower that's supposed to be liberating the rest of the world. Is this what we are actually doing? And you know the answer because it is self-apparent. You don't have to look to the news. You can just open your eyes and look through somebody else's webcam. You can talk to people in other countries and say, this is what I am living. This is not my opinion. This is what I am living. I am living in wars. I am living in torture. The Dark Ages have not ended. In 2012, there was this whole conspiracy that the whole damn world was going to be enlightened overnight. And that idea really disturbed me, to be totally honest, because it did not comply from what I was seeing and experiencing in reality. Like, oh, we're just going to literally skip all of the darkness and all of the shadow in the world and just run into perfection and liberation and awakening? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? It's not how life works, my friends. We have to be accountable. We have to be responsible. This is Sun conjoined Saturn, and I'm just channeling to you. Sit down, kids. I'm going to tell you how it actually is. The world's not going to be liberated overnight, says the father figure. It's through practicality to train his children to be responsible in the world. And I'm not trying to take an authority position and look down on you anyways. I'm just, exemplifying the energy here with Saturn. The world's not going to be awakened overnight. We're going to confront, we're going to deal with, and we're going to do the hard, laborious work of changing these underlying dynamics, because if you haven't noticed, the reason why it's not easy, and the reason why I'm saying it's not going to be easy, is because there is so much stacked against us. And this is other people opposing our viewpoints, but it's not because they're the enemy, it's because they've been conditioned, and they've been trained, and they've been wounded, and they've been hurt in their childhood, and they can't even remember it anymore because it was so long ago and buried beneath so many levels of defense mechanisms, coping mechanisms, etc. And then they take a podium and they say, these people are responsible, I'm perfect, I've never done anything wrong, and we wonder why. because they cannot take responsibility for themselves or be accountable for their own actions. And if you see any such people being inappropriate role models in that way, they are simply showing us everything that is wrong in our collective culture, and we can thank them for doing so. Oh, thank you, collective scapegoat, for showing us everything that's wrong with the world. I'm going to take your example and do exactly the opposite of what you're showing us, because the world needs actual role models in this day and age. And the actual role models are going to be people coming from that sense of compassionate responsibility. That's the integration of the feminine and the masculine, folks. You take the understanding of the practical wisdom of the masculine, the rationality of, you're not going to skip and jump into the new age. You're not going to meditate. We're not going to meditate ourselves into the new age. I'm sorry to say it. Meditation is really important for us to be centered in ourselves, so that way we can be calm and loving and make rational decisions. Very important, meditation. But you can't expect meditation to do the work for you. You'll go into meditation, you'll come out of meditation, you will make actions, decisions, and choices that will change how things are going in your life and world. And if you're not doing that part of things, nothing's going to change for you. So that's the father, right? The mother is, yes, it's practical, but who we are dealing with, these other countries, these other people, these other nations, are all children of God. And we need to have respect and love for and tolerance of one another. We all need to meet one another. We all need to get behind the same goals, which is that we want to live together in harmony, and there is only one way to do that, and that is to listen as much as we are speaking, observe as much as we are preaching. And this is Jupiter in Libra these next several months, which is a golden opportunity for us to collaborate, work with one another, and learn how to listen. Because all of this stuff that's being foreshadowed right now is leading up to year 2020 and even 2019, 2020. I mean, these years are really, really poignant in the astrology in saying there is going to be intense transformation and transmutation of collective world powers. We have to get through that phase and that part of the process first, before we will get to the age of Aquarius, before we can put flowers in our hair and skip and jump and spin in circles and love one another. We have to change through confronting the underlying foundational issues in our world, which is rooted in tradition, rooted in culture, rooted in collective beliefs that are ancient, they're old, and they are outdated. They are inappropriate. They are restricting us from our love and appreciation of one another. So let you be the exemplary Uranian influence at this time and break out of those limiting regimes through paving the way with radical love. And in that endeavor, I cannot support you enough. And I will be here with you every step of the way, doing these type of pep talks, and I look forward to hearing it reflected back, to engaging in fascinating conversations and connecting in a more unified way. This is what's going to be happening this next year. I look forward to that aspect of things. Yes, there can be treacherous things happening in the world, but I look forward to how that's going to bring us together, and we're going to feel good about it. We're going to feel like, yes, this is love, this is real, this is compassion, this is healing. Healing is tangible. You can prove it to yourself. You break your leg, you go to the hospital, you come back with a fixed leg. Healing is real. We can heal more than in that physical way. We can heal spiritually, emotionally, physically. We can heal our collective. We can heal our world. We can heal the divisionism in our world religions, etc. It's all very, very possible. And we will be coming together and ultimately proving to ourselves that it is. So, I love you guys. I love putting this stuff out there. It's such a pleasure to connect with you through doing birth chart readings where I can speak to you on an individual basis and we can heal each other in that type of personal and intimate way. I look forward to connecting to those of you who will be in Astrology Rising in Costa Rica in spring of 2017. That's what we're talking about. That's going to be a really exciting time of great minds and soul family really coming together under the umbrella of we are needed at this time. We are all being initiated into our spiritual warrior stuff. This is Jupiter opposite to Uranus these next several months. We are being initiated. I can't wait for somebody else to do this for me. I can't wait for this information to be circulated by somebody else. I'm going to write my book. I'm going to make my YouTube channel. I'm going to start letting my life be influential and inspirational to other people. And I look forward to connecting with you all in the future. So much love. Namaste.